All right, beautiful people, let's call this episode 59. Hey, 59 of the Athletic Philosopher Podcast. I am your gracious and humble host, Jordan Goldstein, former professor in sport history, philosophy, psychology, sociology. Couple things happened. We're not going to talk about it, but we don't do the professing inside the university anymore. Instead, we are deep with our heart into the world of coaching, fitness training, life coaching, mentoring, endurance training, coaching, a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of theology, a little bit of athletics all rolled up into one. And if you're interested in contacting me about any of those things that I'm now currently doing, I will put my contact information or how you can get into contact with me down in the show notes. In fact, this is going to be a pretty show notes heavy episode because I am going to be trying something today that I have never done on this podcast. And it's a little bit of me being professor and student all at once. And so what we're going to do is a little bit of a book report mash up with a documentary review. So stick with me because I think that this is going to be what I hope a little bit of a new format. Now, I'm not going to be mashing up books and documentaries all the time, but I do a lot of reading, and the reading that I do is almost always connected in some way, shape, or form with athletics or learning or character growth or individuality or freedom. You know, the ever-present themes that we're after in this podcast, and especially that I then apply in my coaching. So I'm going to start incorporating, I think, more book reviews. And not necessarily reviews, but like book reports, kind of like what your teacher used to make you do. Like read this book, write a report, hand it in, or come up in front of the class and tell everybody what you thought about the book. I think that's probably appropriate for someone who calls themselves a philosopher to do that. So look for more book report style podcasts in the future. This is going to be an experiment, though. I'm not going to lie. Because I just finished this incredible book that I just have to talk about. This is the book for today's book report, The Doctor and the Soul by Viktor Frankl. But we also had a massive drop last week from Team Tribal. And if you're watching this, like, my Team Tribal stuff is everywhere, on me, behind me. And we got the final version of our Elephant Mountain 50-mile trail race Team Ultra documentary. And it's called Willing to Try. And you better be willing to try to watch this thing because I'm also putting that in the show notes. And you need to watch this documentary, especially if you want to get a live sense of what it's like to be on the team, what coach, head coach, and owner of the team, founder of the team, president, big chief, Ryan Dreyer, and also produced the movie. Shout out, you did an amazing job. I'm going to be singing your praises a lot in this podcast. Also, my guy Charlie Garwood, he's the videographer, the photo guy, and just like all around hero of these excursions and experiences. But I've done a bunch of podcasts on our team race experiences. And I even have a whole podcast on this Elephant Mountain 50 miler. But we got the movie and I've been thinking about like, how do I want to share my thoughts on this? Do I want to do a giant write-up? I want to do a podcast? And I just noticed a lot of similarities and themes, as I was finishing up this book, The Doctor and the Soul, with what I was watching on this documentary. And it's almost as if the documentary is an applied version of what Dr. Frankl mentions in this book about healing the soul. And ultimately, these big time endurance races are opportunities for self-understanding and self-discovery, right? To find out about who we really are, right? To come into contact with a spiritual knowing about ourselves and through that endeavor to create value, meaning, purpose, and beauty in our lives. And what I'm going to do is sort of go through the movie and go through the book side by side as a way for me to explain, the value of coaching in these events, seeing that reflected in a beautiful story, but then also recognizing that we're not just creating things out of thin air when it comes to our responsibilities and obligations as coaches. There's actually a very deep and powerful harnessing of theory, of spirituality, of athleticism that leads us, not just as coaches, but as athletes towards these incredible life-altering and life-changing breakthroughs. And the language of the film and the language of the book are so strikingly similar in their affect of what they can actually do when we actualize, the ideas. It's just too great of an opportunity for me to pass up. So I'm hoping that this is all going to come together in some beautiful, new and improvised, maybe we'll call it like a crock pot dish or something where we're just throwing things in. We're going low and slow, and we hope that the end product is going to be tasty and delicious. Maybe it won't be. Maybe it'll just be an experiment that doesn't quite hit. Either way, I am willing to try. So let's go. Thanks for coming on the adventure with me. All right. So there's a couple things that I want to get out of the way here. First, I do have a couple of notes. So I'm going to be going through my written notes that I compiled as I was reading The Doctrine and the Soul by Viktor Frankl. And I've just highlighted a couple of those things on a shared doc with some of my Tribal Willing to Try doc. So this is a review mashup. Okay, this is a review mashup. So let me get a big haul of inspiration here. Coffee. And let's get started. Oh, I should probably plug in my laptop. Minor details, just make sure we have power. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about this book first. So I picked up this book at a used bookstore in Toronto. This is a really cool book. Viktor Frankl is one of these outsized literary or intellectual figures when it comes to the value of meaning and the willingness to overcome adversity as a way to proclaim meaning and find meaning in life, right? And Viktor Frankl's big book is Man and His Search for Meaning, and it was his experiences in the Nazi concentration camps during the Second World War. Shouldn't say Nazi, National Socialist concentration camps in World War II, where, he is placed in these inhumane conditions, right? And the whole point is to dehumanize you, destroy your soul, destroy your zest for life. If you're not killed outright, they're going to kill you. They're going to kill you on the inside. But he observed people in these absolutely horrific conditions where you might think, where's the value? Where's the meaning? He witnessed such incredible spiritual and psychological resilience in people who just wouldn't give up the gift of life, And this taught him a lot as a practicing physician, like a clinician, a psychiatrist at the time. It left him with this deep impression of the value of meaning in allowing people to move through any kind of adversity that's put in front of them. So Man and His Search for Meaning is kind of like the popular narrative of what he discovered in the concentration camps. This book, The Doctor and the Soul, is all about his formalizing those observations into clinical practice, into what he calls logotherapy. So The Doctor and the Soul is from psychotherapy to logotherapy, right? And logotherapy is effectively this medical understanding of man's spiritual need to have purpose and meaning. Otherwise, life becomes, in a sense, unlivable and unbearable, and you don't need to be in a National Socialist concentration camp for that to sort of wave over you. So what is going to connect this book with like endurance training? It's pretty simple. It's this idea that taking on suffering can lead to a tremendous amount of meaning and value in your life when it's done for the right reasons and from the right intention. Okay? And I'm going to start going through my notes a little bit here. Otherwise, we'll never get to it and we'll never figure out if this experiment was worthwhile or it was not worthwhile. So the connection between the Willing to Try doc and this book that I'm holding in my hands is that meaning comes from making people conscious of their responsibility for their own life. Okay? That's the whole thing with logotherapy. It's not treating people's psychological issues with drugs or with strategies or with techniques, but it's about using a kind of Socratic questioning dialogue to alert people to a consciousness of themselves and that they are ultimately in control of the meaning of their lives, right? That they are the ones who are in control of their lives. And a bunch of the notes that I have on the book, they sort of highlight this, but he also does a really good job of bringing in like athletic analogies. So he actually talks about the language of athletes and athletics and how athletics can become this very important place where we can recognize, respect, and appreciate this seemingly tenuous pattern between, taking on responsibility and then finding a life of meaning through the struggle. And Frankl has this idea that, meaning in one's life is really one's ability to actualize the deep values that I hold. So I think that life matters because of whatever, X or Y. And I can only actually have a meaningful life when I can see myself living out those values day to day. And he's got this clarification of values. So maybe let's just get right down into the weeds, like right into the middle of it. So when it comes to meaning, a lack of meaning destroys life, okay? So fostering meaning is really life-saving. That's like one of the biggest takeaways from reading this book. It's like when we talk about value and meaning, we're not just talking about these like silly subjective things that only matter to you and that aren't really pushing the needle in the value of your life. No, these are like objectively important things that if you don't have them in your life is going to spiral out of control. And it's not going to be a life worth living. It's not going to be a life that you recognize as one that's worth living. Would maybe be a better way to put it. And so a lack of meaning destroys life. So fostering meaning is life-saving. And what are these kinds of values, right? So life is meaningful only when I can actualize the values that I want to live by. So what are these values? Frankl tells us that there's these three categories of values, that have the propensity, that have the ability to give us meaning. He says these are creative, experiential, and attitudinal. Okay? So creative value, that's like passion. That's your artistic passion. That's the, I want to write a beautiful song. I want to create a beautiful painting. I want to move my body in a beautiful way, in an expressive way, right? So by bringing about something that I want to create in the world, because I simply desire to make it, I can bring tremendous value and meaning to my life. There's also experiential values. So something that helps me to experience goodness, that helps me experience a spiritual at oneness with, we'll just say something beyond myself. Maybe it's God, maybe it's the universe, whatever. Maybe it's just nature. It's not dependent on you being a religious believer, but this idea that I can have experiences that bring me into context and into contact with my seemingly smallness in the world, and paradoxically, that makes me appreciate the grandness and the greatness of my life and the potential that's ahead of me, right? So experiential values, like this could be traveling to an amazing place in nature. This could be watching your wife deliver your first child, right? And all kinds of experiences that we looked back on and we just recognize, like, man, life was really worthwhile. So I could have that moment. And Frankl's he's very adamant that the intensity and the greatness of singular moments can effectively create meaning for our entire lives, which you may or may not agree with, but I think in some ways he's correct, right? Because my life can build towards one incredible moment that I don't even recognize or realize I'm being sort of aimed and oriented towards until it happens. And then everything that never made sense or was confusing can like just click into place so vividly and so clearly. And then my entire life becomes like a narrated story that now has a beginning, a middle, and an end that works, that fits. Okay. So we've got creative values, we have experiential values, and then finally we have what's called attitudinal values. We have attitudinal values, and these were the kind of values that Frankl observed in the concentration camps. Okay, and this is one of my notes. It says the realization of attitudinal values can only happen when the suffering is unavoidable and inescapable. So that's like, I'm a Jew in 1943 and I've just been thrown into Auschwitz. Like, the suffering that is about to come on to me is just unavoidable and I cannot avoid this. So then what is this attitudinal value? The attitudinal value is my reaction to this inescapable suffering, this inescapable adversity. I can bring myself through my perspective. I can rise above the suffering to make it meaningful, right? He tells these incredible stories of people in the concentration camp exercising these attitudinal values. One that sticks out to me, and I hope I'm getting it right. One that sticks out to me is this son who was holding on to the memory or to this idea that he would be able to make it through the concentration camp in order to be reunited with his mother, not knowing if his mother was alive or dead, to even have the reconciliation be possible. But his fidelity to the legacy of his mother kept him going strong in the concentration camp, singularly for the hope that he may be able to realize that future vision of reconciliation or of meeting her again, even with this understanding that she's likely already dead. So he never gives up hope. He never gives up his internal integrity, even when the entire world around him is suggesting, just give up, man, just give up. He holds on to this idea, and lo and behold, that's what helps him get through. That's what helps him survive, to live through the adversity. So rather than thinking, woe is me, when it comes to my position in the concentration camp, this is a challenge. Can I rise to meet the challenge? Can my inner world overtake the outer world when it comes to the meaning of life, right? Can I include the suffering into what's valuable and thereby transcend the suffering to take on meaning? It's pretty incredible. So we have these attitudinal values that are available. So even when I cannot exercise creative values, when I cannot exercise experiential values, I have attitudinal values, right? So even when I objectively speaking have nothing to be grateful for and there's nothing that is providing meaning and value in my life, subjectively I can use my attitude to find meaning in the challenge, to let the challenge actually become the meaning. It's quite incredible stuff, and I think it's true. So there's one other thing here that I want to mention before I start to get into the movie here, and that is this courage to be yourself. Because in order for life to have meaning, I have to be able to actualize deep values. And for deep values to have meaning, they have to be personalized. They have to be individualized to me and to my life and to my context. So effectively, for my life to have meaning, I have to exercise myself as an individual. And there's this very powerful little phrase from the Doctor and the Soul that, this is going to be with me forever. In order for my life to have meaning, I simply have to be myself. I have to become conscious of myself, and I have to be responsible for myself. That's what gives my life meaning and purpose. But in order to be, I have to be me. And so he has this line, it's to be equals to be different, right? To be equals to be different. So if I want to have a meaningful life, I actually have to only live my own life. I cannot live the life that others put out for me. I cannot live my life towards others' expectations. I have to live life actualizing and manifesting what is unique and special to me. What is unique and special to me about my life and my circumstances. Okay. So with that table set, because I could just go into this book forever, but I don't want to. I want to mash it up. I want to mash it up with our documentary, with our race documentary. Okay. Willing to try. The title of the book, the title of the documentary itself is pretty incredible. You nailed it. You guys nailed it. This is the story of our Elephant Mountain 50 miler. So the 50 miler is this race retreat experience. Like when we're talking about experiential values, hey, this is an experiential value. Big time. We all travel down to a team house together. We stay with each other in the team house. We do reflective work. We do mindset sessions. We do writing. And the first half of this documentary is all on those sessions. It's all on the way in which we bring ourselves towards this challenge with intentionality. And with a particular purpose and meaning in mind, which is, I think, the overall story and the thesis of this documentary. Willing to try? Well, what is that? Willing to try is about the courage to become open to your potential. It's the courage to become open to your potential. And effectively, when Viktor Frankl says, let's become conscious of our responsibility, what are we all out there on the mountain to do? We want to become conscious of a greater purpose for our own individual lives through a grinding physical challenge. So effectively, what we're trying to do with these events is to bring forward a situation where individuals can actualize all three of those categories of values that Viktor Frankl has mentioned in The Doctor and the Soul. Creative values, experiential values, and attitudinal values. Okay? So that's what we're trying to do. Look, we didn't know that's what we were trying to do, but it's pretty obvious after I was reading this book. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what we're doing. We're bringing all three of these things together. I have here, sports are a combination of creative, experiential, and attitudinal values. Maybe I should break that down for a second here. How are sports a combination of all these three? Well, let's think about it. Creative. What are words I use all the time when talking about the value of sport? Imagination, curiosity, creativity, artistic expression, right? Your body can be a canvas for creativity, right? And the way in which you bring yourself to a race can provide meaning all unto itself, right? So sports can be this creative outlet. They can be this creative expression. They can be this place where I simply start to exercise meaning and value in my life by doing things I enjoy doing for their own sake. Ding, 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 play. Ding, 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 play. Okay? But it's also experiential. So think about it. We're bringing people from across, North America to this incredibly rugged, incredibly beautiful, incredibly awe-inspiring natural environment, and we're bringing you through an experience where you're not just looking out at the desktop image saying, "Oh, those mountains are great." You're on them, you're in them, you're winding through the trail. You're literally inside. You're literally inside of nature when you go on one of these gigantic, massive ultra marathons. So we get these, and you're also sharing it. right? You're sharing it with people who have a similar passion for sports, for a passion for self-improvement through sports, a passion for becoming the best husbands and fathers and business owners and individuals and creators and entrepreneurs that they can be, faith leaders, whatever it is. Like we're all addicted to that. We're all addicted to that on the team. So we have these experiential values, and then we also have the attitudinal values. So like, this is why we put ourselves into the artificial arena of sports, right? I don't want to go to a concentration camp, man. Like, I don't want anybody to have to experience that. But Viktor Frankl is quite clear on these attitudinal values. They can only happen when the suffering is unavoidable and inescapable. So when I'm in a situation where suffering is literally part of what the experience is, only then can I start to bring myself towards these attitudinal values. So this is one of the reasons why we want to do endurance, is because we want to be brought into contact with the ability to quit, but with the inability to quit. And you'll kind of see this in the documentary with one of our athletes who kind of gets himself into a bad spot towards the end of the race, Logan Turner, and he's at mile 42 and he's like, I can't go any further. I'm dehydrated. My body is shutting down. I just want to quit. But here's the problem. How do you quit? How do you quit when you're 4 miles away from any aid station and you're in the dark in the middle of a mountain in the desert? Where do you quit? You can't quit, right? So the suffering now becomes unavoidable and inescapable. So I'm forced into this position where I can actualize attitudinal values, but I get to do it in a relatively safe and controlled environment. That's like the boundaries of sport. It's the inbounds and out of bounds. One of the reasons we want to go inbounds is so we can artificially simulate what it might be like to be forced into one of these situations where we are required to bring ourselves toward these attitudinal values. Okay, so a desert ultra miler with tribal gives you the ability to have creative, experiential, and attitudinal values come to the floor. This is why it's such a powerful and meaningful experience for everybody, and why, thank you, Ryan. Again, why like half of the movie is simply us talking and sharing and opening up and being vulnerable and showing people the courage that we have of our hearts. Because this is sort of like the experience and creative part. And honestly, when you're told like on the spot, hey, you got to share what's deep down inside of you and it's got to be truthful, the suffering is a little bit unavoidable and inescapable, especially in a group of guys where we're taught to kind of close up and not share those kinds of things. So that's a really powerful thing to notice, right? That these experiences, the race retreat experience that you see in Willing to Try, is an actualization and a realization of these 3 categorical values that Viktor Frankl spells out and says, hey, you want meaning in life? It comes from these 3 things. It comes from these 3 things. So is it any wonder why, the people who went and raced to Elephant Mountain, will put it up there as one of life's big moments for them? I think it's pretty obvious. Okay, so why does this then work? But it's because we're making every individual conscious of this greater purpose through the grinding physical challenge. The grinding physical challenge gives you the realization of values, and then to become conscious of your responsibility in taking on suffering and adversity in order to achieve them, in order to realize them. And like, this just blended so perfectly with the overall theme that we wanted to use as kind of this umbrella for the entire experience. The documentary starts off with our big time mindset session, bringing in the theme of freedom from slavery from the Exodus story, and you'll sort of get thrown right into that at the beginning of the documentary. And we use that frame from slavery to freedom, like in a bunch of different ways, but it's mostly about the courage to live authentically. Like it's It's the slavery is like this idea of the known or of the comfortable or of the familiar or of the mediocrity or of the settling, and freedom is like my higher potential. Freedom is my ultimate calling of the greatness that I could have if only I had the willingness to try. If only I had the willingness to try to become who I was maybe destined to be. So what we really want these race experiences to do to people is to shatter internal limitations about what their individual potential looks like. And we want to make people conscious of what that is. And then we want to help equip them with the tools to become responsible to make it happen for themselves, to make it happen. So this freedom from slavery and the desires to live authentically as individuals, towards this higher calling and purpose, I mean, to be equals to be different. And one of the big striking things that, lots of people in the documentary hit upon is there just ain't a lot of people that want to do this stuff. There's not a lot of people that want to test themselves, that want to challenge themselves, that want to try to eke out more of their potential. And we don't gain satisfaction or contentment or meaning in our life by just settling like everybody else. So in order for us to have a life of meaning, in order for us to be, we got to be different. We got to be different. We need the courage to be ourselves. So bringing you into contact with other people who also want that courage, binding us together through the opening of the hearts, through sharing, opening up, being vulnerable, spilling out the truth that's inside of us, and then going out and tackling a gigantic physical challenge in nature. Well, the ultimate aim is to put individuals in a position where they can experience that conscious breakthrough. We talk a lot about the breakthrough. This is the transcendence that occurs in self when you smash an internal limitation or you smash an internal narrative that you recognize as a limitation as opposed to a determination. Yeah, that's a good one. And Viktor Frankl, when I talked about the intensity of the moments and how they can give meaning to life, I'm going to quote him here. Quote, "The higher meaning of a given moment in human existence can be fulfilled by the mere intensity with which it is experienced and independent of any action." So when we talk about breakthroughs, this is real stuff, guys. The breakthrough. But everybody in the racing context gets the breakthrough wrong. We all imagine that the breakthrough is the finish line. That it's like when I finally get the outcome, when I cross through, that's when everything will become apparent. That's when everything will be realized. That's when it all becomes actualized. And it's like, no, it doesn't. Like, it really doesn't. The breakthrough might have happened 4 months before the race. The breakthrough might have happened the day before the race. The breakthrough might happen 2 months after the race. You just don't know. But through the intensity of the experience, where you are actualizing these creative values and forcing yourself into situations where attitudinal values can be recognized, you position yourself towards the intensity of a moment. And I'm not going to go into like a movie review of the doc, but if you watch it, you'll notice. You'll see people having these incredible moments of transcendence, maybe multiple times on the screen, and none of them are engineered. None of them are forced. They're all emergent based upon that individual. To be equals to be different. So each individual's race experience becomes different. Each individual's race experience becomes meaningful unto them because of the way we approach it together as a team, where we are here to support that individual heroic journey into the self in a supportive community that is going to push you towards the suffering and the adversity with the proper intention and with the proper heart stance, that being an open stance. And what became so apparent, and I'm forever grateful to Coach Ryan for this, This is like his team. This is like his movie. This is his mission. And he spends a lot of time in the movie talking about my role and the way in which the coaching and this sort of open, exploratory, curiosity, emergent based coaching of meaning, which is effectively what we're trying to do. I think he mentioned in the movie, he described me as an open spirit coach. And I don't really know what that is, but I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect. I think it's exactly what happens. Because what are we trying to do? Right? We're trying to bring people into a position where they are forced into a decision to quit or to keep going. And this to me is exactly like what Viktor Frankl is attempting to do with logotherapy. He wants to bring people into direct contact with the meaning of their lives. He wants to make them conscious of that. And then he wants to give them the courage and the strength to become responsible for that meaning. And when I think about coaching, I think about this line from The Doctor and the Soul. And again, these are lines that will stick with me forever. Quote, "If we take people as they are, we make them worse. If we treat them as if they were what they ought to be, we help them become what they are capable of becoming." Gosh, that's such a banger, Viktor Frankl. That's such a banger. I got to read it again. Quote, "If we take people as they are, we make them worse. If we treat them as if they were what they ought to be, we help them to become what they are capable of becoming." So, when somebody is hurting and they don't want to go any further, I don't look at them as this open spirit coach and think that's a broken person, that's a demoralized person, that's somebody who's not going to be able to do it. I look at them as if they're the person that they want to become, that they're the person that is finishing, that they're the person that's overcoming, that they're the person that's triumphing, that's conquering, that's transcending. And I speak to that person. And I give grace towards that person. And I give space for that person to find their way through the suffering, through the adversity, so that we can keep moving forward together. I coach the heart. I don't coach the body. Ryan coaches the body. He's damn good at it. He also treats the heart, but it's just a little bit different than what I do. And we sort of alludes to this in terms of our strengths. They balance each other like quite nicely. But when I'm reading this book about Viktor Frankl using logotherapy to treat people of like anxiety and schizophrenia and all these kinds of neuroses, I don't think exactly like, hey, like when we're out on an ultra, this guy's a schizo, that guy's a paranoid neurotic. Like, that's not what I'm thinking. But I am understanding that when we bring people into these situations and create an environment where attitudinal values, those values that can only be realized when the suffering is unavoidable and inescapable, pardon me, well, I don't do any service to that person if I just look at them as this broken, the body is getting beat up kind of person. It's like, no, we gotta move through to the spirit, because that's what we're out here trying to do. We're trying to be conscious of our potential and to gain the courage to live as that individual. So I need to be able to connect to that person's heart. I need to be able to interact with them on a spiritual level. And that's all that Viktor Frankl is telling us to do in this book. And he's talking to other physicians. He's talking to other psychiatrists. But when I'm thinking about my own role as somebody who can live coach somebody through a 50-mile ultra, like, is that not what we're doing? Is that not exactly what we're doing? We're making people conscious and responsible of the spiritual awareness and ownership they have over the meaning of their lives. And that all sounds very deep. And that all sounds very like serious, and it is, but that's not like the all right, here we go, team. Like, we're going to, it's not engineered. It's not engineered in this artificial sense. It's constructed and it emerges through a series of choices. So I just love this. Like, I just love the synergy, the connections here. And I could probably just go on forever, because one of the things that Frankl talks about so much is, the freedom to take on responsibility, the freedom to take on a conscious understanding, that we're in control of our lives. And once I internalize that, like, the outside world almost like dissolves itself. It almost dissolves itself when it comes to meaning. Because the meaning is always determined by me. It's always determined by my inner stance. It's always conditioned by my inner world. What's really apparent in the Willing to Try documentary is that openness breeds its own courage. Openness breeds its own creativity. Openness breeds its own experience. And that openness, what is that openness? It's that open heart. It's what I talked about with the Exodus story. When I'm reading the Exodus story, it's striking and shocking to me how often the phrase hardened heart appears. He's talking, when we're talking about Pharaoh hardening up his heart. And God's the one who does this. God purposely comes in and hardens his heart. And that language, right? That language has always stuck with me. I even recorded a podcast on this idea of heart stance, right? Like, I don't show me your mindset. I don't care about your mindset. Show me your heart stance. Are you open-hearted or are you closed-hearted? Because that's going to determine far more about you than something that's going on up here. Anything that's going on up here. And logotherapy is this very intriguing, open style of therapy. There is this part in the book, which, again, there's so many cool things about this book, but one of the elements that he talks about is treating people with certain kinds of neuroses with this technique called paradoxical intention. So it's like you can actually treat somebody's mental health issues with paradoxes, right? By, if I'm an obsessive compulsive and let's say I'm just afraid of germs, so I wash my hands a million times. One of the things that happens in this paradoxical intention would be, you take ownership of the fact that you're kind of nuts. And instead of saying, being ashamed of, I wash my hands like 100 times a day, you start proclaiming that as something to be proud of. And then you start going around telling people, I'm going to wash my hands 150 times today. I'm going to wash my hands 200 times. I'm going to become the best compulsive hand washer you've ever seen. And by taking kind of responsibility over the symptom and doing it in kind of like a humorous way, patients cure themselves like within weeks. You have people who were shut-ins, recluses, like people who are like agoraphobic, for example, like fear of open spaces. I haven't gone outside in years, and then it's just like you kind of treat them with these paradoxes, and all of a sudden they're out in 3 weeks. It's wild. It's wild stuff. And the point of it is to understand the power of the inner world and the power of the inner narrative to determine the material reality of the external world. Like, I have another podcast on this. I have another podcast. It's like, can I affect reality through my subjective experiences? And my answer was, yeah, you kind of can, actually. The inner world has the power to change the outer world. And ultimately, that's why we want to do these races. And that's what Viktor Frankl is telling us about, meaning. Meaning comes from the inner world. And once I get a handle on that, then the outer world almost becomes malleable in my hands. Whether I'm climbing to the top of a mountain or I'm looking down the barrel of a concentration camp commandant's gun, it's the inner world that determines the meaning of the interaction. It's the inner world that determines the value. And when we recognize this, when we become conscious of this, our entire lives change. And that's what's so powerful about these race retreat experiences. It's an ability for somebody to viscerally come into contact with that part of themselves through the shared struggle that we all go on with the race, but also with the opening up to the veracity and the honesty of the inner world, and to not be afraid of the darn truth. And ultimately, that's something that Viktor Frankl nails. Don't be afraid of the truth. Use the truth. Use the truth for you. Use the truth always. Now, I think I'm going to have to cut this experiment short, because the next part of this would likely take forever. And I have things to do, and you have things to do. I really like this idea of mashing these things together. Let me just quickly peruse my notes here. I just want to quickly peruse my notes. Oh, these are good. Yeah, these are so good. I love it. I love this book. Ultimately, what I want you to respect about Viktor Frankl's thesis is meaning matters. And in a world where drifting away from meaning is sort of seen as the common, as the standard, as the normal, you need to do everything you can to not be normal. You need to do everything you can to set yourself apart. You need to do everything you can to realize meaning in your life, which, again, is only determined by you and can only be realized through individual values that are for you, by you, with you, only for you. So authentic living, sort of like the antidote. It's the antidote to the meaning crisis. And a big physical challenge that you care about, not because other people tell you it's important, because you determine it's important for yourself. Well, that can be just what the doctor ordered in order for you to save your soul, to heal your soul. Frankl's pretty clear about this. He's like, religion, that's about saving your soul. Logotherapy, that's about healing the soul. And we do a lot of soul searching out there on the race. Everybody does. It's one of the reasons why we want to go out there. So I guess my concluding thought here is, like, let's become open. Let's become open to the real value that physical challenges can open up to us when we have the proper intention, when we understand why we should be doing them, why we should become spiritually open to wanting to place ourselves into experiences of tremendous adversity and tremendous suffering. Because that's the only way we're actually going to be able to realize the things that we value the most about ourselves, that we're hoping our characters will express in our attitudes and in our actions. And then we can know ourselves to become better versions of ourselves. To be different, to be us. You need courage, you need meaning, you need values. This is why you should always train from the heart. This is why you should always play from the heart. And this is why you should always listen to your heart first when setting any major aim and direction in your life. The brain just figures that stuff out. That's what it's good at. It's good at figuring out what to do after you've already determined where you need to go. It is not the aiming mechanism. The brain can't give me creative values. The brain can't give me experiential values. The brain can't give me attitudinal values. It's not what it's there for. It's just not what it's there for. So open up to the heart. Open up to the seriousness of meaning. Get some in your life. and recognize that physical training is an excellent avenue to truthfully realize this. Like this is the real deal. This is the real deal. Watch Willing to Try. You don't necessarily need to go read The Doctrine and the Soul, but you should certainly become a Viktor Frankl respecter. Become a Viktor Frankl respecter. Maybe pick up Man in His Search for Meaning. Great book. And then you'll see what I mean about the synergies between these things. That Man in His Search for Meaning might take him to a 50-mile race with his homies in the desert. And it's not some fictionalized story that we tell ourselves to convince ourselves that what we're doing really matters. It really matters. Frankl gives us the theory. The movie gives us the experience. And again, if you don't think that that can be true, watch the movie and you tell me. Watch the movie, you tell me. It's a challenge. All right, I got to rock and roll. This is fun. I'm not sure I'll do this exact experiment again, but I'm always going to be experimenting. And I'm certainly bringing more book reviews, that's for sure. Or book reports, pardon me, book reports to the podcast. I appreciate you all for listening. We'll catch you in the next episode. Peace and love.